Hi, everyone. We're back with another episode of Fertility Docs Uncensored. I'm one of your hosts, Dr. Abby Eblen from Nashville Fertility Center. And today I'm joined by my marvelous and magnificent co-host, Dr. Susan Hudson from Texas Fertility Center,
Hello.
and Dr. Carrie Bedient from the Fertility Center of Las Vegas. And
Hey.
so today we have a guest, and we're going to get to her in just a second. We've got a couple little things to chit chat about, but
Let's introduce her real quick, though.
I am. So our host is Amy Beckley. She has a PhD in pharmacology, which that is no easy PhD, I'm sure, to get. Very challenging. And she specifically is interested in hormone signaling. And today we're going to talk about implantation with her because that's something that was really near and dear to her heart. And she'll tell you a little bit about her personal story. So what have you guys been up to in the last week or so?
Oh.
All the things.
It's a crazy time of year. It's always, no matter what time of year, it's a crazy time of year, But
so anybody been riding their Peloton? Because Amy tells me that's one of the things she likes to do. Helps her think.
I did my ride this morning.
So
Awesome.
who are your favorite I want to say coaches, and that's not the right instructors. Thank you.
So my favorite one is Cody Rigsby.
Yeah.
He is just amazing. Like, he just makes you de-stress and not think about whatever's going on and just unwind. And he always talks about the things that happened in the 90s and early 2000s. And it's like, it's just hilarious. Like, he's like, oh, remember the BMG Music Club? Like, I got 12 free CDs and then I didn't do any more. I'm like, yeah, I remember that. So it's just kind of cool to just do it every morning and stop and think and unwind.
So as a non-Peloton user, explain to me, like, when you sit there and say, who's your favorite instructor? And then we start talking about like subscriptions to things other than Peloton, like explain to me how these instructors work.
So they each record classes and they each have different specialties. So they have a treadmill, they have a bike, I guess they now have a rower.
Yeah.
And they do like weightlifting as well. So they all record classes. I'm a bike, I have the cycle bike. And they'll do like 30-minute classes, they'll do 20-minute classes, they'll do high intensity, they'll do HIIT, they'll do pop music. Those are my favorite. It's just, something to like get the heart pumping and just kind of forget about all the stresses of the world and think about something fun, like, what were you doing in the 90s and 2000s?
So have you ever done any of the ones where you just like can bike along a French city or San Francisco Bay or any of that kind of stuff? You can just do it where you can just bike and you can bike at your own speed and your own pace. And I do those every now and then. And the funny thing was, when my daughter went to San Francisco to interview, I went out there with her. I'm like, we got to go to Golden Gate Park because I've already biked through here on my Peloton. I want to see what it looks like. So those are kind of fun to do too, I think.
Yeah. No, I've never done those. I tease with my husband that I do it more for the entertainment value and the unwinding and listening to awesome music and like just totally like turning everything off. Like, I put my headphones in so nobody can bother me. Like, I can't listen to the kids or the dog or the husband. I'm just like, nope.
So now, do you ever like go and participate with the class? Are you part of? I always feel intimidated if I'm part of like a group classes, because Susan, you can do them.
No.
You can do them asynchronous or at the same time. You can do them with other people, and you can see what they're doing, and how you can try and compete with somebody in the class if you really care to do that. I don't, but
no, I do the recorded ones. I mean, I'm like, I wake up in the morning, I answer emails, and I go down to my Peloton, and I have this half an hour that's my time, and I don't want to change it to whatever time their live classes are. I'd rather just pick my instructor, I look through the music. I'm like, all right, this is good music. I'm gonna pick this one.
Well, very cool. So hopefully we're all well rested, because two of us have done the Peloton today. Carrie, I guess you're going to have to be the next one. You're going to have to get it in before the end of the day, right?
I mean, I'm looking at it. Does that count for anything?
Oh, almost.
Like, my weights and my bike are sitting next to me in this room, and I don't have the official bike. I've got a jerry-rigged version so I can use the app, but it's very cute. Like, my towel is sitting there already. I think the last time I got on it was 6 months ago, approximately.
I have a Bowflex that's sitting in my garage. Does that count?
You and I subscribe to the same exercise program right now, Susan.
I've had so many pieces of equipment that have have served as like, accessories to my closet to hang
hang your
things
clothes
on,
on 'em.
and I lay things on them. So, well, are we ready for a question real quick?
Yeah, let's
do
go
it.
to a question, Susan.
All right. So our question today is, hi, I have just started listening to the podcast. Thank you for what you are doing. I've had a terrible time trying for baby number 3. I've had two full-term pregnancies, first child at 29, second at 31, now 35. In between my 2 living children, I had 1 miscarriage and my first D&E. I got pregnant in 2020 with my 3rd child and was totally healthy. However, I had PPROM at 19 weeks, elected to terminate, and then had later to have a D&C to remove residual placenta. Ever since, I have had a myriad of emotional and physical problems. We found out in 2021 that I had Hashimoto's and is now regulated with medication. Got pregnant with Femara in summer of 2021, only to miscarry again, resulting in a 3rd D&E. I am now seeing an RE who did a surgical procedure to eliminate scar tissue in my uterus, and finally my endometrium is building up again. I've been doing a few rounds of Femara. Is there anything else I can do to increase my chances? This has been such a hard journey for me and my husband. Thank you. Well,
Susan.
I would think, first of all, you need to, when you see your RE, definitely get a full recurrent pregnancy loss evaluation. I mean, and your situation is a little bit different because you have had a loss, at least 1 loss in a second trimester, which that adds in things that we have to look at that honestly, a lot of us don't have to, second trimester losses are pretty uncommon. And so I'd just say, make sure you get a full recurrent pregnancy loss evaluation, because I think everybody is worried about your endometrium, which we are obviously worried about your endometrium, but we also don't want to be missing something that could be contributing to challenges.
And I think going ahead and working with the Femara and having the procedures and keeping an eye on everything, I think that will help you get pregnant a little bit more quickly. I think that sometimes in cases like this, working with gonadotropins or an injectable medication, if you're struggling with your lining, sometimes that can be really helpful. That is not a default that we go to most of the time. And if your RA is looking at your lining on the Femara and says, hey, this is plenty thick, then you don't necessarily need it. But that may be something that is helpful for you depending on what your lining is looking like on the Femara.
Yeah, I agree with all those things. And just sometimes supplements like vitamin E or sometimes aspirin will improve blood flow. I mean, that's, there's not great data on that, but those are sort of the extra things potentially that you could do. Because when you've had a couple of, particularly the second trimester loss and had a D&C after that, just the concern is that your estrogen level stays lower for longer, and the endometrium, as you know, probably doesn't build up as well. And so, certainly that's always a concern, but I would echo kind of what Carrie and Susan said as well.
And I would definitely pay attention to the emotional component of it as well, that you were mentioning, that you guys are having a hard time. That is normal. That is expected. Get extra help, whether it's Facebook groups or local support groups or a therapist of some sort. Yeah, for both of you, because people always say like, oh, the woman had to go through XYZ. Well, the man's going through a lot of that as well.
At least the emotional part for sure.
At least the emotional stuff. And so, Amy, as we were talking ahead of time, you had mentioned that you had kind of a tumultuous journey in building your own family, as well as how that plays into your professional work. So what's your story? Tell us.
Before I say my story, I really want to jump in as a scientist. And this kind of will lead into my story. She mentioned Hashimoto's, you guys mentioned lining. We just did a clinical study where the best treatment for women with recurrent miscarriage was letrozole or Femara, a HCG trigger shot, and then luteal phase progesterone. So there's actually quite a few number of women who will ovulate with the Femara letrozole, but still they don't have a really good luteal phase health. And so adding that luteal phase progesterone like they do in IVF procedures actually helps. So I'm just going to throw my scientific view in. It's not medical, it's just scientific. But yeah, I struggled a lot. This story is very familiar. I've had 7 miscarriages in my career.
Oh, wow.
Multiple years of IVF, and I was unexplained infertile. And being a scientist, given the diagnosis of unexplained, I was like, at first I was very broken. I was like, I just can't believe that I can't have a baby. Like, here I am, this smart, educated woman. Like, what is wrong with me? And so, going into the RE, he's like, we have absolutely no idea what's wrong with you. We've done everything. Everything looks great. All the testing comes back normal. Your best chance at conception is IVF. And I was like, okay, let's do it. Like, I need to have a baby. I need to be a mom. So he did IVF. The second cycle was successful. I now have a 12-year-old son. We teased that we named him Cash because he took all of our cash. And it's funny, every year I have this costume. It's like a money bag and it's like the face cut out with like money on the top. And I got it for him as a baby and I put him in there. And then so every year I make him put it on it. And so we've had to cut out holes for the crotch. And he's now old enough that his torso is so long that I have to cut all of it next year. So it's just going to be like a shirt. But
I'm sure at 13, he's going to
so
be like,
cool.
Mom, I'm done with this. I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah, no, he doesn't go in public that way, but he definitely does it in the house. So I say thank you. I appreciate you.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so after I had my son, about 2 years after, I was like, okay, I want to build my family again. But this time I was like, I don't want to do IVF. I instead want to understand what's going on. I want to try to solve this issue because I am a scientist. I was just like, this is a really great experiment. I'm going to be the guinea pig and I'm going to try to figure it out. So I had many, many conversations with my RE about, why I kept losing pregnancies. Why did IVF work? What was the difference? What hadn't we tried? What hadn't we looked at? And I'd been charting my cycle and I would have a positive ovulation test. So positive LH surge. And then I would get my period maybe 8 or 9 days later. And I had a lot of spotting as well. And so I was like, maybe I just have a progesterone deficiency. And he's like, well, we did your blood work, your cycle day 21 or 7 days past ovulation blood work. Everything looked great. You ovulated. And I said, well, is there such a thing as like not having enough progesterone to support implantation, but still ovulating? He's like, yeah, there's absolutely something like that. It's just not something we've studied because we haven't had good diagnostic tools to look at it.
I have a question for you there, Amy. How many days from the time your period started generally until you had your next period? How long was that cycle length there?
So I would ovulate pretty late in my cycle when I was younger, probably more like day 18, 19. And then, so I would have a typical, 26, 28 day cycle, which was normal. And so that's another reason they kept, everything's fine. You have a normal
cycle length was
cycle.
good.
But through charting, I'd say, okay, I had the positive test, a little bit later, and then my luteal phase was a little bit shorter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I said, is there such a thing? And he said, well, we don't have, a good diagnostic. Like a blood test will tell you if you've ovulated or not, but it's not going to tell you, if your levels of progesterone are sufficient. And so that really gave me idea of, we should be monitoring progesterone longer throughout the implantation window. So like when you think about implantation, you have a positive ovulation test or positive LH test, and then your body will release that egg sometimes, usually, hopefully. And then it has to go all the way through the fallopian tube where hopefully it gets fertilized by the sperm and then goes to the uterus where it will implant. That whole journey takes about 7 to 10 days from that positive ovulation test. And so if you get your period before, that 10-day mark, it could be that you just literally don't have enough time for that egg to get released, fertilized, travel all the way down and have a good implantation. Because what that embryo will do when it implants is it will send a signal back to the ovary and say, hey, we're pregnant. Please keep making progesterone. I need it. And so that is what HCG does, is it rescues your body. And so you don't have another period. So I said, okay, I think I'm dropping my progesterone too soon, and therefore I'll get a positive pregnancy test, but it's not a good implantation. Maybe there wasn't enough time for it to get pregnant, and then I would just get my period and not have success. He's like, Amy, that was a great theory. I will absolutely give you progesterone. I don't know if it's going to work, but progesterone is not, it's bioidentical. We give it during IVF. It's not harmful. He's like, great. Couple cycles into it, pregnant, and she's 9. And I was like, wow, maybe there is something here. Like, and so, yeah.
Did they ever think about checking your progesterone more than once in there? Because, the initial studies that were done, before people, because early in my career, we didn't really know to check progesterone on day 21, 22, or 23. So the initial papers that came out looked at checking progesterone like 3 or 4 times in the luteal phase and averaging that number together. The problem is logistically, you can't ask people to come in the office easily 3 or 4 times in that short window to do it. But did they ever think about doing that? Or did you ever do that as part of kind of your fact finding at all? Or
yeah, no, I mean, I 100% agree with you. And they never suggested it because most women on IVF are given progesterone.
Right. Yeah. It's only
and so
women,
I just
right.
basically asked for the treatment. And I said, I don't want to mess with, having to do this 3 times. Just give me the treatment.
Yeah.
But that basic idea, what you just said, all those studies is exactly what Proov, which is the product that we invented, does. Is it looks at progesterone, it looks for the sustained elevated levels, and we don't do it through blood, we do it through urine. So progesterone circulates in the serum and then gets metabolized as something called PDG, or pregnetyl diglycoside for long. And we look at that in the urine, and we look 7, 8, 9, and 10 days after ovulation to make sure it's sustained elevated levels. And if it's not, then we empower that woman to go back to her physician and say, okay, maybe I'm not ovulating. Maybe I need, luteal phase progesterone.
So Amy, would you say that, so first of all, for our listeners, another thing about serum level of progesterone is serum levels go up and down throughout the day. And so you're really just truly doing a spot check in time. So we don't know if you're at a peak trough or kind of at a mid-level at the time that we happen to draw your blood. Is the level of the hormone that you're testing in the urine, does it have a smoother steady state, or is it variable throughout the day as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we use first morning urine. And so basically it's the 6-8 hours before, and it's the average of the progesterone levels.
And what levels do you look for?
We look for 5 micrograms per mil of urine PDG. And in clinical studies that correlated to about 10 nanograms per mil in blood. It's not a apples to apples, it's an apples to oranges, because again, it's urine versus blood. Blood goes like this, like you can't, but the average between 55 women was about 10 nanograms per mil, which is considered to be the lowest level you want to have a healthy start to a pregnancy.
So tell us a little bit about your company, Proov. I kind of glossed over that and I didn't really say much about that, but because of what you've been through, you've started this company, Proov, correct? And tell us a little bit about the company and what you do with your app and how it can be beneficial for our patients.
Yeah. So after my struggles and finding success and really like self-diagnosing my issue, I came out of the closet and I told my friends and family that I was dealing with this and we had succeeded. And I had so many women coming to me, friends, family, asking, well, what did you do? Because I want to get pregnant too. And so by helping many friends and family members, one day, one of my, friends that also went through IVF and had an infertility battle called me. She's like, Amy, we have to do something. We should invent a test to see if somebody has a good ovulation. Because there are, especially with women with PCOS or Hashimoto's, like you can ovulate, you can release an egg, but it might not be a good egg, or it might not have enough of the hormones present to have an optimal pregnancy. And so let's do a better job of understanding ovulation and the hormones involved. And so I went in, the literature, I went on the FDA website. I'm like, all right, cool. Let's make this device that measures this thing called PDG in urine. And we did a crowdfunding campaign. Wow. I got a $50 logo off Upwork. And I was like, look, this is something that I think would be beneficial. And if women also do, I will make it. And as long as they buy it, I will continue making it. And so it was just my really desire to give back and help women have the tools that they need to advocate. Another reason that I did it was because, after my first loss, I was 6 or 8 months into trying, and I went to the OB and she's like, well, you've only had one loss. You're only 28. It happens. Like, go try again. And I just felt like women needed something to to have while they were in this, like, I can't help you phase. Right. And so I personally think that fertility should be 100% covered, just like diabetes and heart disease and all this other stuff. And it's not. And so if we can give women ways to advocate, so it's like, my idea is if you can diagnose an issue sooner, you can go in with that information and get help sooner. You don't have to sit there after loss or month after month of negative pregnancy tests.
So walk me through how it works. If I sign up and I have the Proov app on my phone, how do I get from there to testing my urine for progesterone?
Yeah. So fast forward about 4 or 5 years, because we've been in the market since 2018. So we have an app now that is, so we have, I'll show you, it looks like this. These are, let's see, my thing's blurred.
Yep, right there is perfect.
Yeah, so It looks like this. It comes with 5 test strips. One you take in the beginning of your cycle, and then you take an ovulation test to see when that peak fertility is, and then you take the next 4 during that implantation window. To look at that sustained elevated level. And so what you do is you download the companion app on your phone, you enter in your period days, and then the app will tell you when it's a testing day. And you say, okay, it's a testing day. Then you will take your first morning urine, you'll dip a strip, and then after 10 minutes, you'll lay it on this little gray card we include with the kit. And then you use your phone and you just take a picture of the test. And we have really cool, like, machine learning algorithms, and like we calibrate it to concentration curves on the back end, and it will recognize if the test is valid, make sure there's no like debris or shadows or anything on there. And if it's a valid picture, it'll give you a hormone value, and then it'll say what next. And so we'll do that throughout the entire cycle. We'll tell them, hey, you just had your peak LH test, you're likely fertile for the next 2 days, have intercourse. And then they'll start taking their PDG test to check to see if it was a successful ovulation, all 4 days. And then at the end, we give them a report card, basically, of their ovulation, where we've developed a score. So it's a 0 to 100, 100 meaning you had sustained elevated PDG levels, you have a successful ovulation. These are what's shown in clinical studies to have the highest chance at conception each month. And then when it goes down, you can say, okay, well, maybe only 3 were positive, or only 2, or only 1, or 0. And it kind of gives you a gauge as to how much progesterone that you made, how successful of an ovulation you had. And then we link to resources such as dietary changes, things you can do exercise-wise, supplements that you can take. And then we link to doctors. So we're building a provider network where if women need help with ovulation induction, say they're getting a really low score, they want to talk to somebody about a letrozole or a Clomid, or luteal phase progesterone, that we can connect them with doctors that know about our technology that can help prescribe them those medications.
So
sorry, go ahead, Susan.
So one thing I'd like to share with our listeners, when I think about like ovulation defects, not just people with PCOS, but there's all kinds of ovulatory disorders. And we're, for years we focused on, the luteal phase, and it was like, throw progesterone. Number one, it's safe, pretty easy. It's one of those things that, we can do, but I think it's important to know that if you're having a problem in your second half, you really need to have the first half evaluated, because a lot of times we as clinicians end up seeing people sometimes who don't have things like PCOS, but they actually have diminished ovarian reserve or things that, have been glossed over. It's like, oh, you're not ovulating on a regular basis. You probably have PCOS. And then you come in to see us and it's like, oh my goodness, you have an FSH of 16. Like we need to like kick this in gear for you to be able to have the family that you're desiring and things like that. So, as people are listening to this, know that it's not all in the second half. The first half leads to the second half.
Yeah, bad egg usually equals bad ovulation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like women are like, oh, I had a low score, I just need my doctor to give me progesterone. I'm like, that might not be what you need. You might need letrozole or Clomid or something else, like FSH. So we're just there to give them that score and then give them to the physician to actually treat them. But yeah, I absolutely agree. We actually have, now that you mentioned FSH, so we have another product It's a new product. It does ovarian reserve, so it measures FSH, and we do it 3 times at the beginning of the cycle, and then it's quantitative, so everything gives hormone values, and so we can see if that FSH level is between 0 and 50. And so we check 3 different times, and we check a pattern, and then we tell her, at the end of the cycle report, we say it's low, it's diminishing, or it's normal, to give them an idea. And so anytime FSH is above 11, we give them kind of a flag that says, hey, you might have diminishing ovarian reserve. If it's over like 25, then it's like, okay, you have low ovarian reserve. Mm-hmm. But it's trying to, again, use urine, which is non-invasive, tools women can use at home to help them have that conversation, to get them into the physician faster.
So does that test cross-check the estradiol levels as well to show if there's any suppression of the FSH because the estradiol is already high?
This is a great question. No, so we have another kit. It's called Complete. And so what it does is it measures all the hormones across the cycle. So it does FSH, estrogen, progesterone, and LH, and we do baseline hormones just like you would do like a cycle day 3 blood work. And so when we pull the report on this kit, we also look at the estrogen value with the ovarian reserve, because sometimes you do see that high estrogen that's suppressing the FSH. But this kit will do the entire cycle. So we look at all 4 hormones to show ovarian reserve. If there's any, we pull a ratio of LH to FSH to see if there's some type of indication for PCOS. Mm-hmm. So if that's above 2, we kind of flag that as something to talk to your doctor about. We also look at estrogen and give them a 6-day fertile window. And then we close the fertile window with the rise in progesterone. And so this kit, a lot of women with PCOS use this kit because they always get the positive ovulation test and they don't know if they're actually ovulating. Mm-hmm. So we use estrogen, a rise in estrogen to open the window, and a rise in progesterone or PDG in urine to close the fertile window. And then we look at the luteal phase health in the implantation window. So when, that same 4-day window we did with the other kit.
What you then for somebody that has PCOS, their estrogen level may be up and elevated, but then they don't ever ovulate, so they don't ever make progesterone. So therefore you pick it up in your kit because their progesterone level wouldn't go up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So what kind of FDA validation, kind of external validation did you have to go through to say, okay, these levels are legit, they can actually tell you what we say that they're going to tell you? Like, what was that process like?
That was an interesting process. So we had to get an FDA clearance. And so we had to show the FDA data that women could understand the results. They could do the results at home. We had focus groups of women dipping strips in artificial urine that was spiked with different amounts of hormones. We would say, what was the result? We'd cross-check it, what the real result was. We'd have, professionals reading it versus them reading it. We did the blood versus urine. We matched it to the urine, a urine ELISA, which is a lab-based urine measure. We looked at all the literature to say, okay, what is that value of PDG, which is different than progesterone, that is a healthy cycle and in proven fertile women. So we did a lot of data. It took us about a year to get clearance, but we are the only FDA cleared test to confirm ovulation during this implantation window.
And I would even think the picture could be a point of contention with the FDA. If you're taking your own picture of what those strips look like, and then you're trying to quantify that into what that would be if you had a serum level of it, I would think that would have been probably the hardest hurdle to get over with the FDA.
Well, so we didn't have the app when we went through the clearance. And so the strips actually work as 1 line or 2. So basically like pregnancy tests. So but it's opposite. So if you have 2 lines, your PDG is low, below the threshold. And if you have 1 line, it's above the threshold. So it's more like drugs of abuse type of testing, which was a little bit confusing for women because they really wanted 2 lines.
They wanted 2 lines.
Yes,
we all want 2 lines, unless you're testing for COVID.
Yeah,
exactly. Yes, right.
Seriously, the first time I swabbed my family and I'm like, we're all getting checked. One of my kids was like, that looks like a pregnancy test. I was like, how do you know what a pregnancy test looks like?
That's funny.
Yeah. So we didn't have the app when we went through the clearance, so they can be read visually. We just heard a lot of feedback from women that they didn't know when to test. They needed a tool to help them log it. They weren't sure if that was a faint line or not, like was it positive. And so the app is just an optional piece of
Gotcha.
like a thing that we give them that is like, if you want to use the app, great. If not, we have this little chart that's included with the instructions. You put the date, of your positive LH test, and then you put the, positive or negative on the days, and then you can kind of take that to your doctor as well.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, I think there's a great need for that. I think people really like being able to check a lot of things themselves and just, getting answers. So I think that's really exciting. So what's your next, what's the next thing you're going to do with your app?
We're going to do more, physician, not intervention, but flagging, right? So women love data. I mean, like this is our number one selling kit right now on our website. It's the complete kit, because women just love their data. They like to see it, but then they get this amazing, really rich report where it talks about ovarian reserve and ratios of this and that and fertile window and it, like all this stuff, and they don't know what to do with it. And so our next step is to start offering, as part of the kit, a physician to review the results with next steps, kind of flag them as you might have an ovulation issue. Let you talk to a physician. So it's similar to, if you go to Quest and you get a UTI test, if it comes back positive, a doctor will call you and say, hey, you have a UTI. Let me call in this, to the Walgreens down the street. Like, I would love to do that. So that's kind of where we're headed right now.
Oh, yeah. Well, that sounds exciting. Well, very good. Anything we didn't cover that you'd like to mention about Proov?
I mean, we're woman owned. We're here to help support. We have an amazing, online Facebook community that is growing every day. We're here to kind of offer support and help women move forward. So that's about it.
Sounds like a fantastic set of technology to use at home, and especially if they can bring it in, it's kind of nice to take a look at it and say, okay, this is what I see, this is what we can do, and this is how we can help do it. Although sometimes I think giving progesterone alone, not in the context of Femara and HCG, is really tricky, because I have patients come back to me who say, I'm not getting my period, I must be pregnant. I'm like, no, you're just on progesterone. You may or may not be pregnant, but it throws things off. So it's always nice to have extra data to help work with all of that.
Yeah. That's the good thing about the PDG progesterone metabolite testing, is that we can see that rise, and we can say, yes, you have, likely released an egg, you made progesterone. And we have a lot of women that use it to show that initial rise, and then they'll start their progesterone because they know that they've actually ovulated and they want to support their luteal phase that way. I mean, the biggest reason why I did this is nobody was really talking about the luteal phase or the health of the luteal phase or implantation or anything. It was just, a positive ovulation test, that means you ovulated. It's like, well, not really. No, especially, women that have PCOS.
It means you may have ovulated.
Yeah. Do you know there's a big lawsuit going on right now with ovulation tests?
No.
Yeah, look it up. Like after this, look it up. So it's a class action lawsuit in California and New York. And basically they're suing all the major brands like Clear Blue, First Response, like all the Target, Walgreens, all those brands, because it says 99% accurate ovulation test. And so these women are like, it's not accurate at detecting ovulation. It's accurate at detecting LH, but it doesn't mean I actually ovulated. And I was like, yes, finally.
So I guess they're going after it was mislabeled then. Didn't give them the correct information.
Right. I mean, the correct FDA regulation is an ovulation predictor kit. So it predicts your 2 most fertile days. It doesn't tell you, it's not an ovulation test. So at some point during the last 20 years, we removed the word predict, and now it's just called an ovulation test, which is wrong. It's not an ovulation test.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, very good. Well, it was great to talk to you. We got some really interesting information from you, Amy. And so to our audience, thanks for listening, and tune in next week for more. Also, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review in Apple Podcast. We'd really love to hear from you. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Be sure to follow and subscribe to stay updated for all things related to infertility.
You can also visit fertilitydocs.com to submit specific questions you have about infertility. All questions will be answered on the podcast anonymously for our Ask the Doc segment, so don't hold back. We also love to hear episode ideas, so don't hold back. We want to know what you're thinking and want to hear.
And as always, this podcast is intended for entertainment and is not a substitute for medical advice from your own physician. All right, we'll talk to you soon. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.